Hi, everyone. I'm Paul.
And I'm Michelle.
And you're in
The
Spooky Coop. Welcome to the Spooky Coop. Hope you're not chicken. So, Michelle, I hear you have a very good story for us this week.
Oh, yeah. I have a story about a family curse.
Okay.
A family curse. Not like our family curse that we're growing worms to feed to the chickens.
No.
No, that is creepy, though. Someday we'll have to tell you about how we've been cursed to grow live worms for the chickens.
Mealworms specifically.
Yeah, mealworms. Anyway, let me tell you about this curse. We lovingly call this story Ding Dong Death, like Ding Dong Ditch. Here is the story. Now, there's this girl who comes from a long family line that started a long time ago. And her family was sort of a well-off family in the past. And there was a big storm in their village. And their village had a local witch. And the witch had a baby. And during this terrible, terrible storm, her house had fallen, had collapsed in the wind. And so she went to their house, which was obviously a house of somebody wealthy. And because it was the house of somebody wealthy, it was one of those houses, I don't know if anyone's seen it, that has one of those cranks in the middle. And when you crank the old door, it was like a doorbell. And when you cranked the door went because it had like a winder that hit some metal inside. Do you remember those? Do you remember those, Paul?
I remember those.
Yeah, very
those were
old.
A long time ago.
There were still some
50,
old,
60 years ago.
Oh, even more than that, hundreds of years ago. There are even some doors that still have them in them, and old doors. Anyway, it was one of those old doors that in the middle you crank this thing, and it rang a bell. So she was cranking it, and it rang the bell, and then the master of the house opened the door. I don't know where the servant was because it was that type of house in that time. When he opened the door, he looked at her and she was all covered in rain and, had things in her hair and had her baby all wrapped up. And she said, "Can you keep us here until the storm is over? I'm afraid that my baby will be killed in this storm." And he slammed the door in her face. And she yelled at the house, "You are cursed. Now, anyone who ever rings your doorbell will bring death to your family." He laughed at her, opened the door and laughed at her and said to her, "You old fool, we don't believe in curses." Well, it seems that the next morning, one of the people in his family, and I don't know who it was, but one of the people in his family, while cleaning up the debris from the storm, died, possibly of a heart attack or maybe something fell. It's not precise how they died. Mm-hmm. But every generation of the family afterwards, if anyone came to the house and rang the bell, someone within 24 hours mysteriously dies. Now, someone who's healthy, not someone who's on their deathbed already, someone very healthy in their house. And over the years, over the generations, people would move out of the house, especially when they thought that bell was cursed. They moved to a different house and, they even tried different things like putting an actual bell on a hook that you'd ring the string to get somebody to come to your door. And every time someone would ring that bell to let you know they were there, somebody in the house within 24 hours died. It became a family curse. So within the next generation, they started catching on. This is not funny. This really is happening. So everyone in the family, nieces, nephews as they grow up, cousins, direct family members, all had this curse. if anyone rang a bell at the front of their house to get attention, like a doorbell, somebody would die if they opened the door. So they started building their houses or renovating houses so they did not have doorbells. And then the families were safe. Down the line, there was this person, this girl, who got married. Together, they built a brand new house. Now, this was in the early 80s. They built this brand new house in this complex of houses. And when they built this house, the house people automatically put a doorbell in. So when they moved in, she started to take the doorbell out. She was like up on the area where the doorbell was, and she's unscrewing it and taking the bells out. And her husband comes in, and he's telling her, "What are you doing? That's a doorbell, a beautiful doorbell." And she said, "It's coming out." And she tells him about the family curse. And he says, "That's ridiculous. You know, you don't believe in that stuff, do you?" And she said, "Better safe than sorry. I know it's silly, but come on." He said, "That's stupid." And he puts the doorbell back up. And then she shoves like a paper towel, that's like kind of like tissue paper all around the bells so they don't ring.
Right.
And he finds it. He kind of sees it coming out of the back panel. And he said, "That's silly." And he pulls it out. And she doesn't know that he pulls it out. The next day, or maybe the day after, somebody comes to their house to welcome them to the neighborhood, and they press the doorbell, and the doorbell rings. Ding, 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 the chimes. Mm-hmm. And she freaks out. She said, "That doorbell wasn't supposed to ring." And she's all panicked the whole night. He's telling her, "Oh, you're being silly. Nothing's going to happen." The whole night long, she is totally panicked. She can't sleep. Her heart is pounding. She doesn't know what happened. She knows that in 24 hours, someone in that house is going to die. And the only people living in that house is her and her husband. No good. It's not going to be their Cocker Spaniel. So she can't sleep all night. The next morning, her husband says, "See, nobody died." And she said, "We still have like 9 hours. And she was really scared. He doesn't believe in anything. And when he met his neighbor was a mechanic. And his neighbor said, "I can change the brake pads on your car for you." So him and the neighbor the next day put the car up on these little ramp things, mm-hmm. and they started work on the car. I don't know what happened, if the brake let go or something, but the car rolled off the ramp things and rolled right over her husband who was working on the car and killed him. There you go.
That's horrid.
Yeah, ding-dong death.
Ugh.
Yeah, and so after that, she had the doorbell ripped out of the house and never, ever had a doorbell again.
Not even a ring.
No, not even a ring or security thing. The curse seems to still be in effect. That's really creepy.
That's creepy.
Yeah. So you said you have a story?
I do have a story. I have a story from way back when. This took place back in the late 60s, if I have to remember my notes right.
Yep.
It was the late 60s. The story was submitted by someone named Bill, who is an older gentleman. And he and his family, they moved into a house in Surrey, British Columbia, in Canada, way back in the late 60s. And it was the strangest experience of his life.
Really?
The house was originally built by a man for his wife. His wife's name was Blanche. He had done well for himself, and so they built this house. And she really loved the house. And they lived there for a number of years, and as time went on, they became geriatric, and Blanche eventually, God love her, she passed away. Mm. And her husband, he was, obviously very sad, and eventually ended up selling the house and then going off to live in a retirement type of home. And he sold his house to Bill's father. So Bill and his mom and dad, his dad was a bank manager who traveled around and got transferred all over the place. And he bought the house, the family moved in, and everything seemed to be fine. Just one curious thing.
What was that?
every night, Bill said he kept hearing a woman talking downstairs in the rec room, the recreation room, they call it. Yeah. And he said, and forgive me, my voice is a little bit too low to emulate hers properly, but it was like, that type of talk, just out of range of hearing exactly what they're articulating, you know? And so this goes on night after night, and it's just loud enough that Bill can hear it. Bill's pretty young at this point. He's like 7, 8 years old. It's just out of range of what he can hear. One night, after months of this, he's sitting there in his bed, trying to sleep, hearing this noise, and his mother yells out from her bedroom, "Blanche, for God's sakes, shut up."
And he didn't know his mother could hear this?
He didn't know his mother could hear this. And the next day he asked, "Who's Blanche?" And he said, and his mom told him, well, that was the wife who passed away, who used to live here. And I guess Bill's mom was very, very in tune with this sort of stuff. It didn't bother her at all. But the noise was quite troublesome. And while they're there through this, there's other weird things that happen too. Their pet chihuahua would be lying there just sleeping on the living room floor, then all of a sudden jump up, run into the dining room, and start barking like crazy at one particular corner of the dining room. And he would not stop. And every once in a while, Bill's mother would see this and she'd walk into the dining room and say, "Blanche, leave the dog alone." And she would. Wow. The dog would settle down. So, no.
If you're wondering what I'm talking about, go listen to episode 5. Or was it 6? I'm sorry.
6.
Yeah. Go listen to episode 6.
But do listen to 5 as well if you haven't.
Yeah.
So, this goes on and on. Strange things like this, that sort of paranormal, weird, creepy type of things like this keep going on. There was one night where Bill, he was hearing this and he went down the stairs. And as he's going downstairs to the rec room, trying to see if he can hear whatever this person that, his mother kept calling Blanche was saying, he'd get down, and just as he got down, it would get quiet. He'd walk back up the stairs. He'd start hearing it again. Walk down the stairs. He thought he could start to hear it clearer, and then bang, it would be quiet again. Walk back upstairs and it would start. And he said it was always the evening when it happened. So after some times, one evening, lying in bed, trying to sleep, he said he sort of got used to this noise. It was like white noise after a while that he could just fall asleep to. And it was particularly loud one night. It was a little bit hard. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, his dad gets up, boom, 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 walks over to the stairs and yells down the stairs, "Blanche, for bleep sake, shut up." And it goes quiet. It actually worked. So his dad goes back to bed, hears his mother say something, and they lie there. 5 minutes later, Blanche starts talking all over again. And in the next room, Bill hears his dad go, "Oh!" in exasperation. Actually, Bill said that immediately after that, his dad had had enough. He put in for a transfer, and they put the house up for sale, and we're gone within a few months after that. It just pushed them out, just pushed them away. He could not deal with it anymore.
Wow.
And that's the story of Haunted Blanche.
Oh, wow. I think that would make me move too if I couldn't get any sleep.
Yeah, sleep is an important thing.
Yeah, sleep is an important part of life. Yeah. Now, I have a few more stories, which is kind of fun because this particular podcast is going to be a whole lot of little stories, if that's okay. And this story is actually a UFO story. We have a couple of them.
One of my favorite subjects.
Yeah. And this one is from a woman named Bridget. And that's not a nom, what do you call that? A nom de plume? Anyway, this is not her fake name. This is actually her real name. She taught organ lessons to my mother. When I was a small kid, I was, 9, 10 years old, maybe 12. She was having a talk with my mother after a lesson when they were having a cup of tea. And I don't know why the subject came up. I wasn't, really paying attention until they started talking. She said she had a visit from Men in Black. So, yeah, so this had to have been close to 40 years ago. She told my mother that she had been driving down a road in Massachusetts called I-93. And while she was driving down there, she saw on the right-hand side in the sky in the daytime what she described as an oblong capsule.
Right.
And she said that it, some people might have called it a cigar, but she said it was an oblong white capsule with no other features on it. She stared at it, and actually she started drifting into the other lane, and somebody beeped at her because her eyes were on this thing. She was fascinated with it. Absolutely fascinated with it.
Always pull over before you start gazing at an UFO.
That's true. It's a good thing to remember. And she said that even as she was driving, she didn't seem to pass it. Almost like the moon. Like at night when you're driving and the moon's up, it seems like it's following you. Yeah. It was like that. It was pretty big, and she said it stayed with her for some time, and then it was gone. It just sort of, she said she doesn't remember it jetting away or anything. She just looked down at her speed limit or something and looked back, and it wasn't there.
It wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, but it was very fascinating.
Yeah, I'll bet.
But what was really, really fascinating in this story was when she got home, the very next day, 2 men came to her door. They were kind of the quintessential Men in Black. She said that they were dressed all in black. And even though it's years later, if you can sort of picture the guys from the movie Men in Black, it kind of looks like them. They were dressed in the black suits, well-pressed black suits, the black shoes, all in black ties. Only she said that they had black shirts on. Right. And so they were really all in black. And they showed up at her house. She said they had robotic movements. They seemed their movements were more jerky than they were smooth. And they didn't talk hardly at all. When she saw them at the door, they said that they had something to talk to her about. She didn't even offer them to come in. They just pushed by her. Ooh. And they walked right to her living room. They seemed to know where it was. And they sat down on the couch, and they told her to sit on the chair in the living room. And she felt like, what is going on? Who are these people, and why are they walking in my house? And they asked her what she saw. Then they asked her if she saw anything on it, like any markings or anything. And she said, no. She said, why are you here? What do you want to know? Why is this important? I think she said they asked her if she understood what it was. They asked her like 3 or 4 questions. And the questions were all about this object and her perception of it. Right. And then she offered them something to drink. Really? She said, would you like a cup of coffee, a glass of water or something? Right. And they nodded. And so she got up to get them something. And while she was in her kitchen, she heard them walking out. So she went to see what was going on. I mean, for all she knew, they stole something or whatever. Yeah. So she ran after them, and she saw them leaving the front door. It wasn't even the door they came in. So she went after them. She was right behind them, and they walked out and closed the door just before she got to it. Right. She opened the door, and they were gone. Oh. She said they wouldn't have had time to get in any car and drive away, but they weren't there. And it just really creeped her out. And she actually called the police and said that 2 men had come into her house. And the police were going to send somebody out. And when she described what they looked like, the police told her that maybe she had fall asleep and had a dream about them. Yes. So that was really strange. And that the police right away changed that and said, well, you probably had a dream. That was suspicious too.
That was a fascinating story. So you have another story for us as well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do. This other one happened not long ago, but long enough. There was this area, which is a cul-de-sac. If you don't know what cul-de-sac is, it's a sort of a dead end, but there are several houses around it. So
it's like a circle at the end of the street.
Yeah, like a circle at an end of a street. And there were a whole bunch of people lived on this circle, and there were children outside playing. It was a time when the older kids were in school, and there were younger kids out there playing. And there was a woman who actually was hanging out laundry. You don't see that too much today, but some people who are more organic, and they don't want to waste energy, they'll still hang their clothes out. And there was a woman hanging her clothes out, and she said that all of a sudden, everything became so silent that it felt like her ears were blocked or something. It was like there was nothing to hear. And she can't really describe it, she said. All of a sudden, there was no bird song. You couldn't really hear the kids. She said it was such a lack of noise that it was a bizarre feeling. And when she was hanging the clothes, a woman a little bit around the cul-de-sac, a few houses around, started screaming. And she ran out of her backyard to the edge on the sidewalk to see what was going on. And the woman was screaming and pointing. And when she looked up at what the woman was looking at, there was a disc in the sky.
A disc?
A completely smooth, round disc, UFO in the sky. And it was probably, she said, probably about the size of a school bus and maybe a little more, little more, completely smooth, hovering in the sky, only about the height of a man, so about 6-7 feet over the telephone pole that was out there. And it was just sitting there over the telephone pole. When I think of it, all I think of is, what was that movie that the big, huge ship came in? Close Encounters, where it came in right over them.
Right.
But it was like right there over the telephone pole a little way up. Of course, she called her kids in, and everyone was calling their kids in. This thing was just hovering there. Nobody knew what it was, and all the people in the cul-de-sac either ran in their houses or ran out to see it.
Right.
And as they were looking at it, the strangest thing happened. Now, I've never heard anything like this. I don't know if anyone listening has ever heard anything like this. Let us know, because this is bizarre. She said that a little circle in the bottom of it opened that you wouldn't even know it was there. And then a hose came out of it.
A hose?
Yeah, a hose came out that was a little bit of a hose, then turned into a stick, a very hard stick.
Really?
And, yeah, it was like a hose that turned into
something flexible that became
solid.
And solid. Oh, wow.
And then there was a transformer on this telephone pole, a big transformer.
Yeah.
And it went and it touched the top of the transformer. And when it did, the top of the transformer sparked, but stopped sparking. Like it made a spark and then it stopped. And then it sat there for a few minutes, not for long, for a few minutes, like it was either doing something to the transformer or taking energy from the transformer.
Right.
And it sat there, and everyone was screaming or petrified or just didn't know what. And then all of a sudden, now that thing came out pretty slow.
Right.
But all of a sudden it went whoop, in really fast, like so fast they didn't barely see it.
It's bizarre.
The bottom closed.
Yep.
They didn't see it close. It was just whoop.
Right.
And then the thing took off so fast that it was like there 1 minute, and then all of a sudden, boom, it was gone. Now, they all saw it go in one direction. Everyone saw it go, I don't know. I said, was it north, southeast? She said, no, it was over the street that led to, and I don't know, over the street that led to,
right,
so that meant nothing to me. Yeah. But it went in a direction.
Yeah.
And it started in that direction, and then whoop, it was gone.
Wow.
Yeah. And everyone saw it.
That's
everyone.
impressive.
And after I talked to this one person who gave me that story, I talked to another person and they gave me the same story.
Right.
So it was absolutely
That's fascinating.
amazing.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So what was it doing to the transformer?
It was, well, what are the possibilities? It was either taking something from it or dispersing something through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
know?
And everyone said nothing happened. Their electricity didn't go weird. No one's house, no blackout or anything.
Right.
Not even a brownout where all their electricity went down and up.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very,
It's hard
very
to tell
strange.
when aliens do things. It's such an alien thing to understand.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all alien to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I heard Paul has a good story to tell about Men in Black, and I think we'll listen to his story, and that'll close out this podcast.
I do have a good story, and it actually echoes the type of Men in Black story that you told earlier. There are similarities. This one, though, was in a completely different environment. This took place on the Watah-Mohawk Reserve in the Muskoka region of Ontario.
Oh,
Yeah, my friends Terry and Lucia, who live there. Lucia told me of an experience she and her daughter had one day. They were in their house and they noticed a man on the road that passes by their property. They have quite a long driveway, and he was just standing out there. And they continued, they were getting some things ready that they were going to deliver down in the middle of the reserve to another person's house further on down. So they get into their car, load their stuff up, and the man is still standing there like an hour later. They drive down, and as they're driving by, Lucia stops and they roll down the window, and she calls out to him and said, I noticed you've been standing here for quite some time. Are you all right? Do you need a ride? And he said he was looking for a ride, waiting for a ride to come along. She said, well, hop in, we'll give you a ride. And he got in the car, and she said he looked Aboriginal, but he was dressed in a suit, and he had perfect combed hair. There was no hair that was out of place. It was all almost like it was manufactured. This perfect black shiny hair that was combed across him. And as they're driving along, he asked them, he asked them, so I hear that there are some strange things that are happening out here. And she said, oh, yeah. And she and her daughter, started talking about the many things. Every time they'd finish talking about something, he would press further, saying, are there any other things? This is fascinating, and sort of egging them on, right? And getting as much out of them as he could of all the different stories. So they arrive.
And you mean paranormal stories?
Paranormal stories about events, everything from spiritual events that were happening, doors being knocked on, nobody there, UFO encounters, the whole 9 yards. So they get to a point where they pull into the property. It's a cleared area, right? They have to drive in another long driveway to get to this person's house. And they get out and, they explain to him they're just going to drop these things off and they'll get back and drive him off to the other part of the reserve. So he gets out of the car, obviously to be polite as well, right? And they go and they drop off their things. When they turn around, he's gone. It was only less than 15 seconds, she said, that they left the car, dropped off the items, and turned around. She said there was no way he could have walked, run, or sprinted out of their sight within that time across this open space of property where they were. And just like your story, he just vanished, just disappeared.
Yeah, so it's like he waited for them so he could get the information he wanted.
Yes.
And when he got that information, he disappeared.
He just disappeared at the first opportunity.
Wow.
The minute they weren't looking, or he was in some place that he was out of sight, he just vanished.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, most of the Men in Black stories we have, that's how they end. Mm-hmm. It's really amazing. And if people want to hear more of our Men in Black stories, they're going to be coming in the future episodes. So hang on, because the upcoming episodes of the Spooky Coop are going to have a lot more different episodes of a lot more different phenomenon that you can only find here in the
Spooky Coop.